I am absolutely delighted that we're addressing the topic of today's webinar. We have in the last 2 years been in conversations with more than 20,000 small business owners across the country, and every month we collect research from 500. And while the major impact, short-term impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and its management and the various restrictions, levels of financial support, etc., that happened over the 2 years has to a large extent possibly come to an end, there are still a significant number of challenges that many small business owners, their families and their employees are facing, particularly as we have the added complexities now of rising interest rates, rising inflation, geopolitical uncertainty with respect to what's happening in Ukraine and Europe, what's happening here in the Asia and the Pacific Basin area. So we still have a high level of uncertainty, and the most recent research that we've done with the 500 small business owners is we have 2 in 5 that are concerned or very concerned about their own well-being. And I think, as all of you know, as business leaders and business owners, that, when you're it's a bit like the analogy that my grandfather used to use to me about huskies, if you ain't the lead dog in a husky pack, the view never changes. And we're the lead dogs as business leaders. No one can be more energized, resilient, focused on their customers, focused on contributing to the business, focused on working well with each other, if we ourselves as business owners are not in the best possible space. So Shane and Wendy, it's great to have you here and to have this topic around mental health in the workplace, and whether it's a workplace of a couple of people or some, Wendy, that you've been involved with that involve thousands of people around the world, the knowledge as to what's happening and what works and why it works is the same, whether it's a couple of people or whether it's 20,000 people. So Shane, first of all, I'd like to, introduce you. You're the founder of Moving Minds. I'd love it if you could share with everyone a bit about, your own background and what brings you to, what you're doing with Moving Minds. And then perhaps you could introduce Wendy for us. And then I will, I'll remove our faces and I'll get you to share your screen.
Thanks, Bill. Look, absolute pleasure to be here, and it's a wonderful opportunity to present with Wendy DeMarti. Yeah, my name's Shane Billsborough. I'm the CEO of Moving Minds. We're an organisation that's dedicated to providing an engaging platform to engage a workforce. I think that's one of the big things at the moment is having our staff engaged. Bill was talking about the tumultuous times that we do live in. So engaging a workforce, which is really important, but also providing some really good mental health and wellbeing solutions for individuals. And there's a whole raft of different opportunities that we provide for employees, but more importantly, we want to measure and evaluate mental health. We've published a couple of research papers, most recently one in the Journal of Current Psychology, which came out this year, showing that the program that we run makes a significant impact on depression, anxiety, and stress. And so we want to be part of the solution. I think Wendy described it, the program as mental health by stealth, which is really exciting. So that's a little bit about Moving Minds. Really absolutely honoured to present with a colleague, Wendy DeMarti, who I've known for a number of years. Wendy's a leader in her field. She's got a degree in positive psychology. She's led a number of organisations, and from a real practical, she's the person that you can walk into a room having a not so good a day, and she brighten the room up. So she's got a great amount of energy. So for those small or large business owners out there who want energy, Wendy DeMarti is the person. So off to you, Wendy.
Oh my goodness, I need to bring on the energy. Thanks, Shane, for that. Okay, thank you again, Bill, for having me on, and Shane for also inviting me to partner with him today. My background is, and I think very fortunate background when it comes to wellbeing and mental health. I worked for around 10 to 11 years with Pearson in my previous role, and was lucky enough to work with leaders in the risk and resilience team globally, and also with the local leaders within the Asia group as well. So who not only supported me, but supported all their employees in driving wellness and mental health in the workplace. So I'm hoping to bring a bit of a practical lens to this webinar. Currently, I think I'm just jumping from one awesome leadership team to the next. So, and very lucky to work with Nelnet International, who are also supporting this space. I head our culture and risk division. So it's just been an absolute pleasure to now implement these hopefully simple and practical applications that we can with mental health and wellbeing. I think we sometimes get a bit scared that it's complex. It's actually not. It's just looking after each other and ourselves at the end of the day.
But Wendy and I have put this presentation into 3 buckets, as Wendy likes to call it, and keep it very practical. So why are we worried as business owners? Mentally healthy workplaces, they need it. And how can we adapt? That's a really important part of this. I'll skim through this from most people here understand that we are worried. We know prior to the pandemic, there were 1 in 5 Australians who were experiencing a mental health condition of some kind. I put this paper in place, and I know it's very text heavy, but I'll just talk to it. In 2012, a researcher by the name of Bloom suggested that by 2030, this is 10 years ago, that the cost of mental health to the global community would be $6 trillion. And if we were talking about this 10, 15 years ago, we were talking about cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. But now we're talking mental health. So in 10 years, this has surpassed some of the biggest, most significant chronic diseases that humanity has faced. In a nutshell, yeah, we're concerned, we're worried. Prior to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, there was about 264 million people that had depression across the globe. The pandemic has added another 53 million people. That was just in 2020. So we're worried. The 2021 data hasn't come out yet. So there is a feeling that there is more to come. And the same with anxiety. Prior to the pandemic, there was about 300 million people that suffered from anxiety disorders. 2020 data showed that that increased by about 76 million. So 2021 data hasn't come out yet. So there's still more to play out. Now, I think as Bill said in the intro, we're not totally through the pandemic at the moment. So there is areas to be concerned about. In Australia, so how does this data pertain to us as business owners in Australia? So the ABS did a wonderful snapshot of data in 2020, and they found that 3.4 million Australians saw a health professional for mental health. 13% saw a GP for mental health, and 8% saw a psychologist. And it's interesting. We talk about what's affordable, what's accessible, and it's not just when we talk about numbers. These are real people. On a personal note, my daughter was impacted by bullying online during the pandemic, and we've got 8% of people who saw a psychologist. We couldn't get in to see a psychologist. They were booked out. They were booked out for 6 months in advance. So the need for this sort of thing, and I think as business owners, it forces us to understand the landscape. It's much broader than just our employees. The knock-on effect is to their children, to our children. It changes things significantly. The data also showed that women were more likely to experience high levels of psychological distress than men. I tried to do some research on that and try and find why. Wendy, maybe you can shed some light, but a lot of the data seems to suggest that it's the family-work conflict. A lot of women have a lot more of a hands-on approach with family, and that family-work conflict was one of the reasons from data all across the globe that showed that that's why women were suffering a little bit more. Wendy, do you have any light on that?
Gosh, I think we could have a whole webinar on that, Shane. So I think ultimately, statistically, the women do, take on board a lot within the family dynamics. So I think there's a little bit around that. Do I know anything other than if it's looking at sort of the gender differences? No, I don't. There's possibly something in there.
Okay. And the other thing that was really interesting is that 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 34. So our younger demographic were experiencing high to very high levels of psychological distress. And that was more than double those aged 65 to 85. So again, that's a very, very interesting statistic. This was pretty significant before COVID, and that was loneliness. But I, on a personal note, I didn't realize that extended down to 16-year-olds. I thought our younger generation are more connected than ever. I mean, and you know, I've obviously been fooled by Facebook and Instagram and all those social media connecting pieces, but the loneliness is a massive factor. And then if we look at what did individuals try and do? So this also gives us an insight to our employees. What did they try and do? 28% did more things that they wanted to enjoy. So read books, did some gardening, tried to see family, connected more. 37% increased their level of physical activity, and 29% did practice positive thinking, meditation, mindfulness, and those sort of things. So people were trying to do stuff, and this actually gives us as business owners a snapshot of what our employees were trying to do, and especially those in Melbourne and Sydney that went through mass lockdowns. People were looking for things to impact on their mental health. Look, our own data, and I'll just go through this, our own data from 2020 to 2019 shows that overall mental health declined by 19.4%, depression, low mood got worse by 34%, anxiety and stress increased by 14%, well-being dropped, happiness declined, and loneliness increased. So that's a bit of statistics that we got from Australian organisations. So we are in, as business owners, we're seeing this as, you know, firsthand. We're in the Great Resignation. The current pandemic has demonstrated that the most critical asset we have is our people. Our employees are so important to us. You know, and I'll ask the question as we move through this as business owners, because we've had to adapt so much. You know, do we understand our employees? Do we understand people? It's almost incumbent of us to understand our employees a bit better. Yet we're dealing with what we call the Great Resignation. And attracting and keeping talent is a key priority. It's a challenge, but it's such a key priority. And I think, yes, we all know this, but even when I was putting this presentation, when you and I were putting this presentation together, it really did strike a chord on the transient nature of our world. COVID has forced workers, they didn't want to, they were forced to work from home. Now, I've just got this in isolation as a singularity, working from home, but anyone who's worked from home or had to work from home during isolation, wow, that was challenging. I know on a personal note, I had my workstation out here, my partner's workstation over there. I had 2 kids talking at the same time. I was told I was too loud. Dad, can you go into the bedroom? Kids were coming, walking, getting lunch, getting dinner. Wow, that was challenging. And for some of us who could adapt to that, fantastic. There are a lot of people that couldn't. We had to isolate when we were sick. Now, that was, if you got COVID, you had to isolate. But if you got COVID within your household, you were then sent to a room. You were fed through a door, and you had to isolate further. So we had to look after sick children. We had to look after parents. We couldn't visit parents. There were parents who passed. Some of our employees had parents that passed. They couldn't go to funerals. We were then told to come back in the office. So people were totally pushed out of their routine. Then they were told to go back home, work back from home, especially if you're in Melbourne. You had the 5-kilometre ring of fire, as we called it. And there was a certain, as Bill alluded to in the introduction, there was a lot of job, work, environment uncertainty. Increased loneliness, absolutely. I saw it. We all saw it. We all saw that loneliness. There were people who were agoraphobic, and it's interesting. I'm still a bit agoraphobic after the lockdowns. I sort of feel I come back home and think, well, what for? I'm like, I should get out again. But you're so used to just coming back to home where you think it's safe and you think it's it's part of the norm. Some people, some of our employees, I should say, have really enjoyed the time with children and family. I've heard parents who, or males who come back and say, look, I've really loved going to school, picking up my children or finishing work early and spending time with my wife and my kids. Wow, I didn't know how much I missed it. And then there are those who have not, who have actually really disliked being at home, needed that time away, and no wonder now divorce rates are up, slightly since 2019. So this great resignation, it's not something that our employees have wanted, and it's not something as business owners we wanted either, but it's something that's been forced upon them. And these are things as business leaders we need to not just acknowledge, we need to understand, have a real deep understanding of this. So it is a great segue into the workplace, and is it a great restart as well? Looking at mentally healthy workplaces, there's some really amazing aspects to this. Sometimes it's a great way to restart getting people back into the office. Some key stats from Beyond Blue: for every $1 that you invest in a mentally healthy workplace, you get a $2.30 return. That's from PwC. 27% of employees think that the lack of appropriate skills held by managers, and I'd say leaders, are barriers to improving workplace mental health and wellbeing. And 22% of employees think that the lack of commitment at the very top of an organisation has a massive impact on workplace mental health and wellbeing. I reckon that last point is such an important point. Leadership and being committed, not just saying you're committed, but as business leaders, being committed to a healthy workplace and the mental health of your staff is an absolutely critical point in any of this presentation. We don't have senior leaders and senior business owners committing to mental health. This presentation is not going to be worth anything. So what are the benefits? What are the benefits? I mean, we've talked about, the current environment. We've talked about change. We've talked about potentially there's still more to come. We talked about uncertainty. So it is it's a great time to think about, okay, how do I build a mentally healthy workplace? What are the benefits? So for us as business leaders, improved well-being and mental health. Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a really important aspect of all this. Fewer injuries and sick days, great job satisfaction, increased productivity, increased worker engagement. This is a really big one, increased worker engagement. We know engagement levels have dropped. We have fragmented workforces at the moment, people working from home. I was in Sydney yesterday and I was in the Suncorp office and it was like a ghost town. There was hardly anyone there. So worker engagement is down. And I think on a personal note, I think if we as business owners can strive to increase the engagement of our staff, I think that's almost the fire being lit, and also reducing staff turnover. It's interesting, going back to business through the pandemic, the roles have changed. People are now moving on, and it's been such a roller coaster. Wendy, do you want to add anything to that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Shane. I think when I look at this slide, I think about this is not just about COVID. This is something we've known for a long time. When we look back at the Great Resignation, I think hopefully we'll one day go, that may have been just a blip. But I think ultimately for us in Australia, I think the wave is yet to come. So it's just about understanding that there has been this bit of a reset in employees as to what they want to do. If you're looking at some of the work that's coming out of HBR, the Harvard Business Review, they're looking at a huge amount of statistically people quitting their jobs and just reassessing what they're doing. So it's a bit of a challenge for us. Research around mental health in the workplace is absolutely driving this. And I love this conversation because this is the right thing to do for businesses. And I think a lot of people are trying to do that already.
Thanks, Wendy.
Mhm.
So, okay, so in terms of for organisations out there who might say, well, okay, what do I do? What is a mentally healthy workplace? Where do I start? What do I need to do? So, in essence, it's where employees feel respected, supported, and free to speak about concerns or stress. That's your mentally healthy workplace. Risks to mental health are managed. We'll talk about stigma later on. I spoke to a lot of older business owners and employees over the last couple of days. And mental health is very different to what it used to be. There's still a massive stigma in some organisations with mental health. I'm going to ask you, everyone on this webinar today, what is your view of mental health? I mean, where it's invisible. And unless you have a mentally healthy workplace, it may remain invisible. People with mental health conditions are supported. This is so important. Now, if you don't have a mentally healthy workplace, you may never know who is suffering and who's not. Who's going to come forward? That people feel comfortable to come forward in your workplace. So by helping employees to stay at or return to work, it has clear benefits for both individuals and businesses. And there's a zero tolerance approach to discrimination. Now, that's a mentally healthy workplace. It can't be a tick the box. We as business leaders have to believe that and must act on it. And I think that's the key to how do you set up a mentally healthy workplace. So how can we adapt? We've covered a lot of stuff, and we've rendered the landscape in terms of change and great opportunity. So how do we adapt? And leadership, it just comes up in all the journals, it comes up in all the literature, and we know ourselves that leadership is so important. So show leadership and commitment for the workplace mental health as a small business owner. So leadership and commitment is really important. First step that any of us on this call can do is to learn, and this actually goes back to Wendy's oxygen, put your own oxygen mask on first. So we as business leaders, we need to learn more about the topic. I've done more reading about mentally healthy workplaces and mental health and what does it mean in the last 6 months than I've ever done in my whole life. And I've been doing it on the run because every time I think I know something else comes up. So learn more about the topic. The more you're armed with it, and use best practice. There's some best practice out there. There's again a reference here, but go to best practice, and that's really important. Mentally healthy workplaces are workplaces that people look forward to attending, open to individual needs, flexible. So the more you can read about this, the better. And there's some wonderful references out there. Just another interesting piece of reading that's come out that's quite topical at the moment is the ISO 45003. It's been put out by the government, and it might be a really good framework. Personally, it wasn't the most exciting read I've ever read in my life, but certainly it is worth having a read. But again, I'll put together some notes that Bill will pass on. So
I just want to say something with that, Shane. I think 45. I've forgotten the number, but it's a management system, and it's a management system that helps us to manage the risk of psychosocial injuries, and that's really important. But ultimately, whatever program or system you use, it's all about getting a simple framework that you can just start to chip away at, and just starting with one thing, and whether it's just this thing for this year, learn about what is the goal that you're looking for. So it's just really chipping away at it. All of those resources give you a framework so you're not having to recreate the wheel. That's the most important thing.
Well said. So step 2 is identify areas for improvement. So in this step, take the time to review your own mental health strategy. Now you might say, I don't have a mental health strategy. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I'll link to the show notes, the National Mental Health Policy 2008 by the Australian government, which you can use to develop. And it's really quite simple. As Wendy said, it's small. You start with somewhere, but really assess what you're currently doing, get a full picture of your understanding. How can you influence change? And these are a couple of points that you can use, a couple of dot points, and Wendy could probably speak to them a bit more, but collaborate. First thing, talk to staff and ask what they're doing well, what opportunities there are to improve, and what priorities there are. So have a conversation with your staff. And, you know, as business owners, it might actually start by having a conversation at home with your partner. Have a conversation. You start having those conversations where you feel comfortable. So collaborate. You don't do this on your own. Again, there's a mental health strategy that there's a guideline that we'll put to a link. Communicate the benefits of a mentally healthy workplace and what it looks like and feels like in your business. There are benefits, again, but again, it comes from communicating. And the other thing is, you know, sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You know, I always say in my family household, we can all communicate better. We can all communicate nicer. And I think that actually moves out to business as well. The way we communicate and how we say things is really important, not just talking about mental health. Role modeling is really important. It's probably one of the most important. Role model the values and behaviours that are expected. You know, and reward others for doing the same thing. So as a leader, if you can role model yourself, then that's very, very important. Create a culture. Yeah, you know, we're learning from mistakes and failure is acceptable. There's a slide that I'll put up right at the end about with a footy coach and about mistakes and failures, but create a culture where it's okay to make mistakes and people aren't living in a culture of fear. And inspire trust with people. Now, those few points, you know, they're pretty straightforward points. I mean, but again, you've got to believe they've got to be innate. They can't be a tick the box. Step 3, show leadership commitment. And as Wendy was saying, a couple of easy points. Make a list of actions you'll commit to over the next 3 to 6 months. They may be maybe 3 or 4. Share this with your team, but commit to them. And start somewhere. I think there was a wonderful saying about when was the best time to plant a tree. 20,000 years ago. Next best time is today.
Yeah.
Your approach may be different to another leader's approach. Everyone has a different form of leadership, but that's okay. There's no right or wrong. The important thing is that leaders are genuine in their approach they take. So showing leadership commitment. Support your leaders. That's really important. You might have leaders and you might have your 2 IC people in your business that you're trusting. Give them support. Are they better equipped to build a mentally healthy workplace culture? They are when they have the necessary capabilities, skills, and mindsets. WorkSafe and KPMG show that an effective leader in creating a psychologically safe, healthy workplace, you need the following. Legitimacy. So, how we conduct ourselves and use our authority to remain lawful, honest, and maintain respect is really important. Communication. The language used by leaders builds cohesion. Again, not what you say, sometimes how you say it. You can say something, you can have a really difficult conversation in a nice way, and it makes such a difference. Mindfulness and attentiveness. A mindful and attentive leader displays compassion and is non-judgmental. I always say, don't ask what was done, but why was it done? If you can understand the why something was done, then you're more going to understand whether it's going to be a repeated behavior or not. You don't just become a mindful and attentive leader. We go back to learning stuff, and as leaders, have you done it? Have you done something on mindfulness? Have you, those sort of areas that we as business leaders, there's some phenomenal business leaders that are doing it. So I think we look at doing those sort of things. So openness and willingness, again, to be able to have open and honest conversations, you need to create that environment. People have got to be able to be open with you, but they'll only do that if your environment is one that's conducive to that. Non-stigmatizing, the mental health, there's still a massive stigma in some businesses where a leader says, oh, it'll be all right, toughen up. Although this sort of language, it's gone now. It should be gone, but it's, for some organisations, it's still there. So, stigma, refers to something negative, negative emotions, negative thoughts, and we really have to have a non-stigmatizing environment, which is so important. Trust and vulnerability, growth mindset, and self-awareness. So they're just a handful of ways you can support your leaders. Wendy, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I do. I think this is a really critical one. Psychological safety, you hear that, and that was bantered around a lot in the last few years, but I think we have to really highlight it because it's important. Why is it important? Because as KPMG and WorkSafe are saying here, those organisations or teams that have high psychological safety, they're also high performers, and people love being in those sort of teams. And what is psychological safety? Well, it's listed on the left there, but it's about trust. It's about everyone having a voice. It's about everyone knowing what their role is. So it's coming back to simplicity. I know what I need to do, and we've agreed to it. And it also comes down to accountability. People are giving me a task and they actually trust me to do it. So it's a real fascinating term. It sounds a little bit researchy and a bit out there, but it's pure performance, and it's to the health and the benefit of the team if we can actually get to that space. So I would really focus in on psychological safety if I was to think about how am I going to move forward.
The second last step is step 5, and that's update some resources. So do you have any resources that your staff can refer to? If you go on the internet, there are tons. Beyond Blue, the Black Dog Institute, there are lots of resources, and even for you as an organisation to develop some. To drive change, you need to have some toolkits, as a fallback for anyone to go to. Policies and procedures are really important. Codes of conduct, flexibility, flexible working arrangements, leave policies, bullying and harassment. These are the key sort of aspects of a mentally healthy workplace. But if you don't have any policies and procedures that define what bullying is, define what harassment is, then it's almost free game. So it's really important to have some policies and procedures in place. Performance and development framework. So, documented conversations of leaders with employees, really important. And programs, so training programs, health and wellbeing programs, mentoring, there might be mental health first aid and additional. So there's a whole raft of things that, we can tap into from a resource point of view. I think we've been pretty lucky in the last little while because there are a lot of resources out there. I think 10 to 15 years ago, Wendy, there probably wasn't a huge amount. Now there's a bucket load out there.
Yeah, I think this is key. Sometimes we start talking about policies, procedures and governance and we start to snooze off a little bit, Shane, but
I know.
we start to snore. But I again, like psychological safety, these are your guardrails and these just help you create those systems. So, there's a saying, you don't rise to your goals, but you drop to the level of your system. So if you don't have those systems or those habits within the team or organization or business, it can become very, very difficult. From a litigation space, this is when, if you don't have that framework of policies and procedures that you follow, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble, not even meaning to. So really critical, get those systems into place, and then it just frees you up with time to actually work on what really matters.
I know Bill's a Collingwood supporter. I'm a Collingwood supporter too. I just thought this was a really interesting parallel of leadership and about creating an environment and culture. And for those of you who are AFL minded, and I'm certainly showing my age, but the gentleman on the right is Ron Barassi, and what you see in that image was really how he coached. He was old school. He was very demonstrative, his way or the highway. Wasn't scared to intimidate players. I mean, you look at the players behind him, they're thinking, who's next? Who's he coming for next? He berated players publicly, and there was a culture of fear. No one was going to come forward and say, Ron, I think there's a problem. And on the right-hand side is the modern day Collingwood coach, his new age. He's always smiling, although he wasn't smiling on Sunday when they lost to the Swans. He's reserved and calm. There are many ways to get things done, and he's very adaptive. He empowers players to take risks. It's okay to fail, but take the game on, take risks. He praises players publicly. There's a family culture. It's a happy place. It's a culture where people want to come to work, win or lose. And it's certainly an interesting way. And I look at him as a great role model for business and the way we can run a business. Not so much Ron on the left-hand side. Don't think that would get through a lot of the psychological safety for today.
And I received a text message from someone who's participating today, so they're not comfortable in typing something up in the chat thing. But the question they're asking me, and they're looking for a bit of input and guidance from you, Wendy and Shane, is they're a business owner. They're male. They've been around a while. They've been around the block a while. Bit of an old dog, I will say. I'm not sure about learning new tricks, but this, being stoic, being like in that picture you showed there, Shane. I think I saw Barry Cable there looking down. He didn't want Ron Barassi coming at him. Mind you, that I think was a premiership North Melbourne team there. Malcolm Blight was in the background as well. But look, there's this old dog, and I think there's a few old dogs around, Wendy. It is very stigmatized, and the six-part sort of plan and strategy is basically saying, listen, there's no really positive, practical stuff that will make a difference unless the lead dog of the pack, is sort of all in and leading it. So the question they've only asked is, what guidance have you got? How should this person and these people think about dealing with this stigma? And I hear the suggestion about, Beyond Blue and a few of the other places, but for them, it's a very deep ingrained thing. And I know myself and our coaching team at Small Business Australia, who are having dozens of advisory coaching conversations every week. And we have a proportion of people where we are connecting them into Beyond Blue or, into psychologists where they can get to see them because they really need to be able to talk with someone. They're in a lot of pain. They're hurt with what's gone on, particularly in the last 2 years. And it's hard. So,
yeah.
There's a lot of old dogs around. What do you suggest?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I'll say a couple of things to those old dogs out there. Don't change. Don't do something that, I shouldn't say don't change. Don't not be your authentic self. Don't do anything that you don't want to do, or don't share anything that you don't want to share. I think I would sit back and come back to what we know, the statistics, and what Shane has shared with us around, it's actually so prevalent. These statistics are probably underreported. So in actual fact, is it abnormal to have mental illness? Probably not. It's probably normal. In fact, it is normal for us to be in leveling degrees of mental illness. The other thing I'd like to say is the one thing, and I heard this, and I'll steal this from Graham Cowan, he's one of the founders of Are You OK Day. He said in a research that he did, the number one impact, or the number one thing that helped people who are in severe depression to get out of depression and to recover. These are very severe depressed people who are having suicidal ideations. The one thing that helped them was someone actually reached out to them. Someone actually said, "Are you okay?" So that was the one thing, not anything amazing, not rocket ships flying into the sky, just someone taking notice. And then the next step is providing hope. This is something that you can work through at your pace with, hopefully, if you're in the depths of it, it would be recommended to get medical support to help you. So I think it's coming back to a very human conversation with people to say, you know what, it's actually quite normal what you're going through at the moment, unfortunately. That's what the statistics are telling us, but knowing that it's okay. There is hope. And with that hope and with that sort of little bit of guidance, lives can be saved and lives can be changed. So that is the most important message I think we can have. But for leaders who are feeling that they can't change, I question that. Don't be yourself.
Look, and I know, Wendy, in some of my past work with senior leaders, in major corporations in different places, they would sort of like, "I am the way I am. I'm not going to change." Blah 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 blah. And I say, well, look, the neuroscience says, in fact, we all can. There's this concept of neuroplasticity, but with an old dog, you got to just do it. You got to learn one new trick at a time.
Yeah.
Yes. And it might be starting off with being open to it and having a conversation. So, and I think, Shane, you've pointed out very clearly, like, this is a journey where today's perhaps it's the planting of a seed for some people, but just planting the seed, you can't then rely on the weather and the quality of the soil and everything else with respect to having that seed turn into plant life and growing. But old dogs can learn new tricks, and certainly in my own professional experience with my own coachee clients, it's sort of one trick at a time, and it's not a race. When people decide in January it's time to lose some weight and get fit and blah, 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 they're attempting to, have a whole bunch of their neural pathways in their brains change at the same time. The amount of energy required to learn more than one trick at a time, is impossible. And so therefore, the pull of going back to the way you used to do it that doesn't really use much energy is there. So that's really helpful. Wendy, Shane, is there something you'd like to add for the old dogs out there?
Look, I wanted to share a story with you. I had the pleasure, previous to Moving Minds, to have a business partner by the name of Herb Elliott, who was the great running Australian icon and also one of the chairman of Fortescue Metals. And Herb and I travelled a fair bit together, and he told me a story about how he became a CEO of Puma North America. And he said, I wasn't really sure about what I was going to do and what my skill set was, but I knew I was good with people. And he said, we're at great change. We're a company that we weren't a great company. I'm putting in place to turn this company around. God, how am I going to do this? And he said, the only thing I knew was about people, about customer service. And so the one thing that he instilled in his team was the one thing that he knew well, and he inspired everyone to be great at customer service. And so what they did was they kept to their promise. They said to what would happen, what would typically happen in stores is stock would arrive, mid-December, and sales would go accordingly. They said, what if we delivered stock in October, and then we could do some really good PR to do some specials, do some big publicity campaigns, and they did. They delivered their stock in October, and it was, people came shopping October, November for Christmas, and they turned things around. And so I suppose the moral of the story is that one, you can change. One thing, you're all leaders for a reason. You started your business for a reason. And so you are a leader. It takes a lot of guts and courage to start a business. We all know that. So you can turn things around. You can be resourceful. Find out what you're good at. What was the reason you got back in? You got into business for a reason. Go back to your roots. You can turn things around. The other thing I'd say is there's lots of inspiring leadership stories. I love making the transition from sport to business. You know, looking at the leadership stuff in sport and using that as inspiring for business. And there's great books, there's exciting things out there that people have done. You know, you look at the way Liverpool were able to turn that whole business around. I forget the coach's name, but what he had doing was at lunchtime, everyone sat together. Everyone at Liverpool, the players sat with the staff, with the cleaning staff, with the janitors. No players sat together. He turned that culture around. And imagine if we were given the job of manager of the Liverpool Football Club. I don't know if I can manage those egos, Bill, but he was able to turn that club around by just, you can. There's always a way. And so I think that we talk about being able to change. I think it's about to adapt. There's something there. There's ways of doing it. There's ways of being ingenious. And I just think, you know, we've all got that inside us. That's why we became business owners. So find that, tap into it, find some inspiration, find some leadership inspiration. There's some incredible stories out there.